Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Boom. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with a friend. Today we'll be reacting to AAU basketball is lying to every kid. Let's check it out.
AAU basketball sells one promise: exposure. Play enough tournaments, get seen by the right people, and your future takes care of itself. That promise sounds fair, it sounds logical, and for a tiny number of players, it even comes true. But for most kids, AAU basketball isn't opening doors. It's quietly closing them. Because the system isn't built to develop players, it's built to move them. And the gap between what AAU tells kids and what actually happens has never been wider. To understand why, you have to look at what AAU basketball was originally meant to be, and what it turned into instead. AAU basketball didn't start as a lie. It started as a supplement. Originally, AAU was meant to give kids extra games outside the high school season. A short off-season circuit, a chance to stay sharp, play against different competition, and enjoy the game a little more. And for a while, that's exactly what it was. Early 1990s, most youth players played 20 to 30 competitive games per year, including high school. AAU seasons were short, travel was limited, basketball still had an off-season. That world doesn't exist anymore. Today, elite youth players routinely play 70 to 100 plus games per year between AAU tournaments, high school seasons, showcases, camps, and unofficial runs. Some top prospects exceed 120 games annually before they turn 18. That's more than many professionals. This explosion didn't happen because kids suddenly needed more basketball. It happened because exposure became valuable. As college recruiting intensified, AAU became the most efficient scouting tool in the country. A weekend tournament could feature thousands of players, dozens of college coaches, and hundreds of games streamed online. Efficiency turned into scale. Between 2000 and 2020, the number of major AAU-style events multiplied. Shoe circuits emerged, year-round schedules became normal, off-season disappeared. And with that shift, AAU stopped being optional. It became mandatory. Players were told that missing a weekend meant missing exposure. Parents were told that opting out meant falling behind. Even multi-sport athletes were pushing to specialize earlier, despite research consistently showing that early specialization increases injury and burnout risk. The original purpose of AAU, supplementing development, quietly flipped. Now, development was expected to happen inside the games themselves. But games don't teach fundamentals. They don't teach decision-making. They don't teach patience. They reveal who already has advantages. AAU didn't become harmful because it added basketball. It became harmful because it replaced everything else. And once AAU positioned itself as the only path forward, the promise it made to kids stopped matching the reality they were actually entering. AAU basketball survives on one promise: exposure. Play enough tournaments, get seen by enough coaches, and eventually, an opportunity appears. That promise sounds fair. The numbers say otherwise. Every year in the US, there are over 550,000 boys playing high school basketball. Out of all of them, only about 18,000 will play any level of college basketball. That's roughly 3%. Zoom in further and the picture gets worse. Only around 4,500 players compete in NCAA Division I each year. That's less than 1% of all high school players. And from there, only about 1.2 of NCAA players ever make the NBA. AAU doesn't advertise these odds. Instead, it markets volume. The average elite AAU weekend can feature hundreds of teams and thousands of players, while a single college coach might actively track fewer than 20 to 30 prospects in that entire event. Coaches don't roam randomly. They follow lists, rankings, pre-identified names, which means most players aren't being evaluated. They're being filtered out. Exposure didn't disappear. It concentrated. Studies on recruiting behavior showed that early ranked players are far more likely to receive repeat evaluations, regardless of later performance. Once a player is labeled early, attention follows. Once they aren't, it rarely arrives later. AAU never tells families that. Instead, they're sold repetition as progress. More games, more travel, more fees. Parents spend thousands of dollars per year, chasing marginal visibility gains that statistically change nothing. And once that investment is made, walking away feels impossible, because quitting doesn't feel like rest. It feels like failure. AAU isn't lying by saying exposure exists. It's lying by implying exposure is evenly distributed. And that playing more games meaningfully shifts the odds. The numbers don't support that belief. And chasing exposure doesn't just drain wallets, it fundamentally changes how kids learn to play the game. Once exposure becomes the goal, basketball stops being taught the right way. AAU teams aren't built to develop players, they're built to win weekends, and the structure proves it. At most AAU events, teams play 4 to 7 games in a single weekend, often with short turnarounds and minimal practice time. Some programs practice less than once a week during peak tournament stretches. That matters, because skill development doesn't happen in games, it happens in repetition, feedback, and correction. Things games are terrible at providing. So coaches default to shortcuts. Ball-dominant players keep the ball, because it wins quickly. Big athletes are parked near the rim because it's efficient. Everyone else spaces out and stays quiet. The data backs this up. Tracking from youth tournament play shows that a small percentage of players account for the majority of on-ball actions. Often 20 to 30% of players taking over 60% of possessions. That's not development, that's triage. Decision-making disappears. Instead of learning how to read help defense, players learn to attack mismatches. Instead of learning counters, they learn speed. Instead of learning patience, they learn urgency. And those habits stick. By the time many AAU heavy players reach high school or college, they've logged hundreds of competitive games, but surprisingly few guided practice reps. Sports pedagogy research consistently shows that deliberate practice, not volume of competition, is the strongest predictor of long-term skill retention. AAU flips that ratio. More games, fewer corrections, minimal teaching. Players look experienced because they've played a lot. They struggle because they haven't been taught enough. That's why college coaches often say the same thing about incoming recruits. They're athletic, they're confident, but they don't know how to play without the ball. AAU didn't ruin kids' skills. It trained them for a version of basketball that only exists on weekends. And when those players finally reach the level AAU promised would come, the mismatch becomes impossible to ignore. If you like basketball videos that actually explain what's happening behind the scenes, not just highlights and rankings, make sure you're subscribed, because the next part gets into
Yeah, I feel about AAU basketball. I saw a thing that pretty much said that we're starting to get behind the spectrum in the U.S. And it's saying the European leagues is starting to surpass us with player development, players being better than us. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm pretty sure, we got the most athletic players in the US, but I think they were saying something about like the European players, they practice more than they play. But now the AAU, we playing more than we practice. You know, I kind of see it from, different angles because I always felt like that the more you play, the better the more you learn as you go. But I also understand that you need practice as well. But y'all tell me how y'all feel about AAU basketball. What y'all think about it? Y'all think it's a good thing or y'all think it's a bad thing?
what happens when AAU players finally reach high school, college, or the pros, and why the system almost never prepares them for that moment. Alright, let's keep going. The easiest way to understand AAU's lie is to look at what happens to the players it builds around. Because the pattern is consistent. Take 7th Woods. At 14, he was one of the most viral players in America. Millions of views, top rankings, AAU dominance. He looked like a future star before he even reached high school. By the time Woods reached college, the advantage disappeared. He had played countless AAU games, but he hadn't been taught how to run a team. He struggled to adjust to structure, limited minutes, and decision-making expectations. His career became a series of transfers. Not because he lacked talent, but because the game he was trained for no longer existed. Or look at Austin Rivers, a more successful version of the same pipeline. Rivers survived because he was elite enough to adapt, but even he admitted later that AAU taught him to score, not to read the game. His early NBA years were spent relearning habits that should have been built earlier. And then, there are stories you don't hear about. 5-star recruits who dominate AAU, commit early, and then quietly fade. Players who bounce between colleges, players who never find a role once athletic mismatches disappear. These aren't isolated cases, they're structural outcomes. AAU excels at identifying early physical advantages: speed, size, explosiveness. It struggles with teaching patience, counters, and adaptability. So when those early advantages disappear, when everyone is athletic, when systems matter, AAU-built players often stall. Not because they're bad, because they were trained for a different environment. And the cruel part is, by the time players realize the promise was incomplete, their margin for error is gone. They're older, expectations are higher, patience is thinner. The system already moved on, which leads to the most uncomfortable question of all. If this keeps happening, why do families keep buying in? AAU basketball sells hope. The numbers tell a different story. Every year in the US, over 550,000 boys play high school basketball. Out of those, roughly 18,000 will play any level of college basketball. About 4,500 will play Division I. That's less than 1%. And from there, the drop-off is brutal. Only about 1.2% of NCAA men's players ever make the NBA. That's roughly 60 players per year, most of whom were already elite outliers long before AAU mattered. Yet AAU operates as if the odds are negotiable. Look at Harry Giles, one of the most dominant AAU players of his generation. 5-star recruit, top-ranked big, endless exposure, he did everything the system asked. By the time he reached college, his body was already breaking down, multiple knee injuries, limited development time, and a career spent trying to recover what constant competition took away. Or take Isaiah Austin, another highly ranked AAU star whose career ended abruptly due to medical issues. His story isn't a failure of effort or talent. It's a reminder that the system never plans for what happens when things go wrong. Then there are players like Jabari Parker or Michael Porter Jr., rare cases who did make it, but even they lost years of development to injuries after non-stop youth competition. These aren't accidents, they're probabilities. AAU players average far more games per year than players in most global development systems, often 70 to 100 plus games annually between AAU, high school, showcases, and camps. Sports science consistently shows that early specialization and excessive competition increase injury risk and burnout. Yet AAU rarely slows down, because slowing down would mean admitting the truth, that most kids aren't being prepared for long careers. They're being pushed towards short windows of visibility. The system isn't lying about saying success is possible. It's lying about pretending the odds aren't stacked, and by building an industry that profits regardless of who's making it through. Which brings us to the final layer of the lie, why AAU doesn't change, even when the evidence is everywhere. By now the pattern is obvious. AAU basketball doesn't survive because it works for kids. It survives because it works for the people around them. The structure is perfectly insulated. If a player succeeds, the system takes credit. If a player fails, the blame is individualized, not systemic. He didn't work hard enough. He made bad choices. He just wasn't good enough. The system is never questioned. AAU programs don't get evaluated on development outcomes. They're evaluated on wins, exposure, and alumni highlights. Showcases don't track who burns out. Recruiting services don't track who disappears. There's no downside for over-promising. Families pay thousands of dollars per year for travel, fees, and training because hope is powerful and vague. Exposure can't be measured. Opportunity can't be audited. And AAU benefits from urgency. If kids believe there's time to develop slowly, they might step off the treadmill. If parents believe patience matters more than visibility, they might say no to the next tournament. So the system keeps repeating the same message. Play more, travel more, commit earlier. Even as evidence piled up that this approach hurts more players than it helps. AAU doesn't need to be malicious to be misleading. It just needs incentives that reward volume over truth. And until someone is held accountable for outcomes, not optics, the system has no reason to change. Which leaves the final question. If AAU basketball is lying to every kid, what would an honest system actually look like? AAU basketball isn't lying because it hates kids. It's aligned because the truth doesn't scale. The truth is slower. The truth is boring. The truth doesn't sell tournaments every weekend. Most kids don't need more games, they need better teaching, more rest, more patience, and fewer adults turning urgency into income. AAU didn't invent ambition, it learned how to monetize it. And for a small number of players, the system works just well enough to justify everything underneath of it. Their success becomes proof, their highlights become marketing. Everyone else becomes invisible. The lie isn't that dreams are impossible. The lie is that this is the only way to chase them. Because real development doesn't happen on a schedule. It doesn't happen in rankings. And it doesn't happen every weekend in a different city. It happens quietly, with repetition, with mistakes, with people who aren't trying to rush you somewhere. AAU basketball tells every kid the same thing. Keep going, you're close. The honest system would tell them something harder and far more useful. Slow down, learn the game, and don't let anyone sell you urgency as opportunity. Because in basketball, like in life, the loudest path forward is rarely the right one.
So what y'all think about AAU basketball? Um, my take on it is it's kind of it's give and take. I think the more kids play, the more they can learn about playing in game. But I also agree with they need to practice more as well. Um, I saw what Jeff T on his podcast said that a lot of times those teams be it's a money play basically, where you might have a kid that's like this, he's a stud or whatever, and you might get somebody to give them $50,000 or something like that for the kid, for having that kid or whatever on that team, and then after that, you just, them guys take that $50,000. They might give the kid $5,000. They might give him $1,000, and then you just add more kids around them. You might give them a couple $100. Sometimes, a lot of times, you ain't got to give them nothing, and then them guys pocket the rest of the money. So it's like, it's a give or take type thing. Sometimes it work out for people, sometimes it don't. Um, I'm starting to like I got a kid. My kid's 12 years old. He played AAU basketball last summer. And just seeing all those kids, like those kids start out at like about 6 years old playing, and man, just imagine if they continue to play a high percentage of games they play during the season, play AAU during the summer, hardly ever getting breaks because really it done turned into what basketball is year round. So if kids start at 5 years old, 6 years, let's just say six, kids start at 6 years old playing every year, year round, and what I'm saying, by the time they turn 15, 16 years old, it could take a major toll on the body. So, I get a lot of stuff that the guy was saying in the video, but y'all tell me what y'all think about the video.